Sound of Freedom, if you haven't heard of it, is a movie by Angel Studios about a man named Tim Ballard who has an organization where he helps to fight child sex trafficking. And this movie is ostensibly about him and his organization. The lead star is Jim Caviezel, who you might have seen him in Person of Interest, or you've probably seen him as Jesus in Mel Gibson's not at all anti-Semitic The Passion of the Christ. And Jim Caviezel himself is a pretty weird dude. In fact, he is literally a QAnoner. There's video of him talking about the whole adrenochrome conspiracy theory, just fully embracing that. And so here he is in a movie about child sex trafficking. Now, a lot of people have been calling this like a QAnon movie, and the movie itself does not directly traffic in the QAnon claims because it's only portraying sex traffickers in like Latin and South America, whereas with QAnon, the conspiracy is usually like high-ranking Democrats, right? So for people who are saying this is a QAnon movie, it's not to say that the movie is explicitly trafficking in QAnon conspiracy theories. It's more that the people associated with it are trafficking in QAnon conspiracies, including the star of the movie. Now, there are a lot of issues in terms of what parts of this movie were actually true, what parts were embellished, what parts were made up whole cloth, that I don't have the qualifications to get into. But there is a video that I watched called The Lies Behind Sound of Freedom, How Tim Ballard Continues to Hurt Victims. That's a video by Dead Domain. And I'm going to post this link in chat for you guys to take a look at later. I'm not going to play it on stream, but I'll be putting this in chat and it'll be in the video description as well when this goes up as its own video. So if you're curious about what actual lies were in there, that's here. But I watched this movie so you don't have to. So full spoilers for everything. You shouldn't care about the spoilers because you shouldn't see this movie. And the one thing that I do know for a fact was a complete fabrication, because Tim Ballard himself had said that this didn't happen, is like the last act of the movie is him like going alone, infiltrating like a cocaine farm somewhere in South America and like killing like a drug lord to rescue a single girl himself and then running off with her. None of that happened at all. That is just invented for the movie to give like some, big heroic thing for it. But this movie is kind of gross. The opening of the movie kind of shows how sex traffickers recruit children. There's this very pretty woman named Giselle who goes around South American countries, Latin American countries, and finding kids and then telling like their parents, I think I'm a talent scout and I think your kid has potential to be a star. And so they get a bunch of them. They're like, okay, we're going to do auditions. And then they tell the parents that they can't be there for the auditions. And then they take pictures of them, which they're taking pictures for a sex trade catalog, basically. And that whole sequence where they're taking the photos is done from the perspective of the photographer, which means that the framing of it is you are looking at these kids from the perspective that the pedophiles will be looking at these kids. And that's kind of a problem the whole movie has, in that at no point is the film ever portrayed from the perspective of the kids. The kids are basically props in this movie. And it's basically like a fetch quest. Okay, I gotta go rescue this kid. At no point is there any addressing of the real psychological harm that happens to kids that deal with sexual exploitation. When he rescues the girl, she just goes back to her old house, and like the film opens with her just playing on a drum in her bedroom, and the film ends with her just playing on a drum in her bedroom. Like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't been kidnapped for months and raped for months. That's weird, because that's not how it happens. And there's never any portrayal of the kids showing any distrust of the authorities coming to rescue them. Like, they've been trafficked from adult to adult to adult. They have no reason to believe that these guys with guns can be trusted when every other guy with guns that they've seen has raped them. So the movie just, it does not fundamentally care about or understand the psychology of children in the sex trade. It's just using them as a prop to tell a story about scumbags. And in like a film that might be about like the drug trade, where the product is drugs literally are just an object. So it's fine to treat them like that. But kids are people, and the movie doesn't really seem to care that they're people. Like, the main character, Tim Ballard, he has 6 children, and we only see them in like one scene. I don't know what their names are. 3 of them look like they're literally just the same age, and they're really pretty much only there so that he can pull a picture out of his wallets to show people, yeah, I've got kids too, so this is why I care so much about this. Yeah, it's like kids are props, and that doesn't sit right. So the plot of the movie is that Tim Ballard is an Immigration and Customs Enforcement DHS officer who primarily deals with tracking pedophiles who are abusing children or sharing CP. But he like has this whole like conversation early on where he's just like, it's not, all I'm doing is catching the pedophiles. I'm not saving any of the kids. And so he ends up quitting his job to go and like form his own organization and get boots on the ground in South America where he can go directly rescue kids. But before he does that, before he goes and quits his job, there's this one pedophile that he has caught who is like the pedophile. Like if you picture pedophile in your head, it's this guy. He's got the pedo stash, he's got the bad haircut, he's got the 70s oversized glasses. It's just like they went as stereotypical as possible. And actually, like, several of the pedophiles shown in this movie have the same pedo stash. And I was just like, that's a little lazy. But, like, he decides it's not enough to just capture this guy. Like, they've got this guy dead to rights. They've got all sorts of CP on his hard drive and everything like that. He's going away for, like, 20 to 30 years. But Tim is like, no, I think we can get more out of him. And so, like, he goes and tries to play, buddy with him. He's like, look, man, I've been at this for so long that I look at everything that you guys do, and basically tries to hint. He's like, that he's been at it for so long that he himself is also becoming a pedophile, doing this to try and get in the guy's confidence so that the guy can set him up with a kid so that he can follow along further and, take down the organization. But the way he does it is like explicitly entrapment, because the guy is like already in a holding cell, and then he's just like, I'm gonna let you out, and then the guy's like, I want to actually have a kid, and the guy's like, oh well, I've never offended, and he's just like, oh come on, I know you left the country for a couple weeks at this point, and basically just asks him to set him up with a kid, and then he goes and does that, and then it's like, okay, now you're under arrest again. The whole thing was confusing. That was explicitly entrapment, and like they already had him under arrest. He was gonna go to prison for 20 to 30 years, and he was like, you do this for me and I'll bump time off your sentence. So it was confusing. And even when like the guy's like, I trusted you, as he's being arrested, and then Tim's like, oh, never trust a pedophile, and it's like, okay, so you're just saying that you are actually a pedophile. It was a very confusing scene. When he goes to South America to set up his whole organization to fight it, there's a guy that he teams up with who's like an ex-cartel member who has basically been using his money to buy child sex slaves so that he can free them and send them home. He's kind of been doing that like on a more individual basis, but here they're looking to do like a bigger thing. And this guy, the ex-cartel member, has like a whole moment where he explains why he's in it, and like it's treated as like a come to Jesus moment, a time like he's bearing his soul, and oh, what a horrible thing he has gone through, that of course this is why he was doing this. But the horrible thing that he's gone through is that he hired and slept with a child prostitute. And this is like one of the good guys in the movie, a guy who has explicitly raped a child. It was so weird. It was so gross that they're just, yes, exactly, McStizzy. That is just question mark. And like the way it's portrayed is he's like, oh, well, I thought she was like 20, but then after we did the deed, I saw like she had like little kitties painted on her toenails, and I realized she was 14. And I'm just like, dude, this does not make you look like the good guy at all. Like I was just like, if I were the Tim Ballard character at this point, I would have pulled out my gun and shot him just for telling that story. But he's like looking at him with such sympathy. It is so weird. And the weirdest thing about this movie, as I was telling somebody on Twitter, it's my understanding that most of this movie is either, fabricated or embellished. So you can't treat it as like a docudrama. You have to treat it as a work of fiction because it basically is a work of fiction. So you have to judge it on its artistic and entertainment metrics, right? And it's not an entertaining movie. It's a very dark and depressing movie. You don't feel good watching it. You're kind of baffled by some of the filmmaker's choices. Like, I have a note in here that says Wes Anderson's sex trafficking, because so many shots in this movie are done in that Wes Anderson like center framing style with like symmetric shots and everything like that. And I was just like, this guy really wants to have some visual thing to say with his movie, but he's not actually putting in the work. Like, Wes Anderson's symmetrical shots are works of art. They could literally be paintings. Like, you could just take a frame from one of those and put it up in the Louvre, okay? This guy is not that. This guy is just really trying very hard to, like, ape that style without understanding the work that goes into it. And it's not an entertaining movie. There's, like, you would think for a movie where it's like, okay, we're rescuing, you know, kids from, like, the cartel, that there would be some big action. But there really isn't any action in the movie. When he goes to, like, he poses as like a doctor to who's passing out vaccines to go and infiltrate the cartel camp to rescue this one girl, and then he like kills the cartel leader to rescue the girl. That kill could have been an action sequence, but it wasn't. It's the one time that we see things from the perspective of the kid, where he tells the kid to close her eyes. So she closes her eyes, so a lot of the action is just sounds over a black screen. It's not an entertaining action movie. There's not really action in the movie. It's not fun at all. It's a movie about a very dark and depressing subject, and if it's full of lies and embellishments, then it can't be educational. And I don't think there's any really valid, like, artistic quality to it. I don't think any of the performances are particularly memorable. Jim Caviezel, I have seen him do better work than in this movie. This movie, he's not really giving it his best. And, you know, the dude's a QAnoner. I'm pretty sure he's got, like, massive brain rot. I saw there was, like, a clip from, in the video, The Lies Behind Sound of Freedom, that I linked in chat. There's a clip where he was being interviewed by Jordan Peterson, and dude has a really weird speaking cadence now. Like, something's wrong with him now. Once you go down that QAnon rabbit hole, like, it's very hard to crawl out of. Like, Vosh has said that once it, like, if they have fallen to QAnon, they're gone now. And this movie was made like 5 years ago, for 20th Century Fox, but then when Disney purchased Fox, they decided that they didn't want to release it. So it has kind of been languishing, looking for a distributor until Angel Studios picked it up. And Angel Studios, they're an interesting company. They've actually been producing, I would say, some, you know, I have to qualify this language, but I would say quality Christian entertainment. They have a TV show called The Chosen, which is about Jesus and his disciples, that I think is like one of the most successful crowdfunded TV shows of all time. And I think there's 3 seasons out right now, and I've watched the whole show. My mom is a huge fan of the show, and even though, like, you know, it's made with the explicit goal of, you know, trying to proselytize and bring people to Jesus, that show does not feel preachy. It definitely has issues. I could make a whole video about The Chosen, but I think it actually cares about telling good stories, and it doesn't try and do an altar call every episode. It just wants to tell, like, actually good and interesting and entertaining stories. So, and it's got good performances and stuff. Like, I actually like the show The Chosen, even though it is explicitly a Christian work of media. So, and Angel Studios has kind of this whole, like, crowdfunded mindset to them. Like, you know, the Chosen is crowdfunded, and they have done, like, crowdfunding goals, like when they filmed the feeding of the 5,000 scene in their show. It was like basically everybody who had backed the show for like a certain amount got to show up and be part of the crowd of 5,000. And I think they actually ended up having like 10,000 people to film that, and they had to like shuttle people in and out to film during different parts of the day for that. But they kind of do a similar thing with Sound of Freedom. They basically crowdfunded getting the rights to the movie and helping it get distributed. And not only that, but they do this pay it forward system where they ask people, if they've got extra finances, to buy a ticket on their website that will get held so that if somebody can't afford to go see the movie, they can go to the website and just say, hey, I would like to see a movie. It's like, okay, well, we've had all these pay it forward tickets, so here, just pick your theater and we'll get you a ticket for it. Somebody's already paid for it. And this movie has grossed more domestically than Mission Impossible, the most recent Mission Impossible movie. And I think a large part of that is because of the pay it forward system, causing some weird inflated numbers in terms of how many people are there. Now, I was expecting to go into an empty theater when I saw this because I was seeing it at like 11 a.m. on a Wednesday, but there was actually like 4 other people in the theater. So this movie came out over a month ago and people are still going to see it. I mean, I went to see it, but that was also because it was kind of a light week in terms of entertainment. So I figured, well, I've been meaning to make this video. I watched Sound of Freedom, so you don't have to. So I figured this was the week to do it. Let me tell you, I did not feel very comfortable being in a movie theater with a bunch of unmasked elderly mouth breathers who decided that they were going to pick the seats right next to mine in an otherwise empty theater. I moved. I was like, yeah, I'm not going to be sitting next to these people. Mixed Dizzy says, that's less people than in literally every other theater I've been in the entire year. Well, keep in mind, Dizzy, that I go and see movies on weekdays, the earliest matinee, because I want to avoid being around crowds of people who are not wearing masks for extended periods of time. So I think actually the most crowded movie that I saw in the last couple weeks was Talk to Me, which is the Australian horror film. I think there was probably about 20 people in that theater when I saw it. So I'm used to seeing movies where there might be only 2 other people. I've had theaters all to myself before. But I was really, over a month after release, I was not expecting to see anyone else in the theater with me. And there were quite a few of them. Okay, so I got to talk about the weirdest thing about this movie. And it's that after the credits start rolling, there's a little thing that says message coming in like 2 minutes, and it has a little countdown timer to it. And I was going to get up and leave, but because I was like, I don't think this movie has any like post-credits things or anything like that. I usually try and there's a website called aftercredits.com or something that I check to see if there's something that I need to stay to the end credits for. But once that showed up, it said a message in 2 minutes. I'm like, okay, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to see what that message is. And I'm so glad I did, because this is kind of like the crux of what the whole like marketing campaign around this movie is. Jim Caviezel shows up and talks about how this movie is something that they don't want you to see because it's been taken 5 years to get it into theaters, even though they filmed it so long ago, and it's just every roadblock because it's telling a story that they don't want you to know. And he like basically tries to retcon your memory of what it was that you had just seen. And he even says, he's like, look, I'm not the hero in this movie, and Tim Ballard isn't the hero in this movie. The real heroes are that little brother and sister who work to save each other, which is not something that happened in the movie. The little brother and sister exist in the movie. They don't do any work to save each other other than when they were kidnapped together, like the girl gives her brother a little like pendant. That's it. They don't have agency in the film. They're not the heroes. Tim Ballard is explicitly the hero of the movie, but here he's like, oh no, the real heroes are the kids that we didn't pay any attention to other than to use them as plot devices in the movie. And then he says the most insane thing possible. Basically, he wants this movie to, start the conversation around the child sex trade, which, yeah, there is a legitimate thing to talk about in terms of, sex trafficking. There are more slaves now than there have ever been, including when slavery was legal, and that's something that the end credits point out. But this dude is delusional. Like, this is a direct quote. He says, I think we can make Sound of Freedom the Uncle Tom's Cabin of 21st century slavery. What? So, for those who are unfamiliar with the novel Uncle Tom's Cabin, Uncle Tom's Cabin, or Life Among the Lowly, is an anti-slavery novel by American author Harriet Beecher Stowe. Published in 2 volumes in 1852, the novel had a profound effect on attitudes toward African Americans and slavery in the U.S. and is said to have helped lay the groundwork for the American Civil War. So when he says that Sound of Freedom is going to be the 21st century Uncle Tom's Cabin, he's saying that this movie should spark basically the QAnoners to rise up and take down the pedophile Democrats or something. It's so weird. It's so self-aggrandizing. But I also think he might be onto something in a really weird way. And like, I should point out, okay, so contemporary reaction in the United States and around the world. Uncle Tom's Cabin had an incalculable impact on the 19th century world and captured the imagination of many Americans in a likely apocryphal story that alludes to the novel's impact. When Abraham Lincoln met Stowe in 1862, he supposedly commented, "So this is the little lady who started this great war." But if you look at more modern criticism of the book, in the 20th century, a number of writers attacked Uncle Tom's Cabin not only for the stereotypes the novel had created about African Americans, but also because of the utter disdain of the Tom character by the black community. These writers include Richard Wright in his collection Uncle Tom's Children, and Chester Himes with his 1943 short story Heaven Has Changed. Ralph Ellison also critiques the book with his 1952 novel Invisible Man, with Ellison figuratively killing Uncle Tom in his opening chapter. There has been a lot of criticism of this book. You have heard the term Uncle Tom used as a slur against black people, particularly black people who are perceived to be betraying the black community, to sell them out to whiteness. And there's also critique of the movie in that it is, or of the book of Uncle Tom's Cabin, in that it was written from the perspective of a wealthy white woman who was, that this rich white woman was taking African American stories, but he wasn't, they weren't her stories, right? And this movie purports to be about CSA survivors, but it's not their story. It's Tim Ballard's story. They don't exist in this movie as characters, just as props. Honestly, if it weren't for that end bit where Jim Caviezel shows up to explain the whole pay it forward system and talk about how this movie is going to be the 21st century Uncle Tom's Cabin, I probably wouldn't have as much to say about it, other than it's pretty depressing. I think there's like kernels of truth in it. Like they do show like footage of, there was like one sting operation that they ran where they rescued like 54 kids, and that was like an actual operation that did happen. They had like footage of it happening, like the real life footage of it. So some of the stuff that is portrayed in this movie is based on actual things that happened. But like I said, if you are more curious about the factuality of the movie itself, please check out Dead Domain's video, The Lies Behind Sound of Freedom, How Tim Ballard Continues to Hurt Victims. As for me, I think this is a very depressing, weird movie that does not center victims and is just another vanity project for a rich white guy looking to boost his credentials in the eyes of the public. Like we just talked about with the Toohey family selling the rights to Michael Oher's story. Next Dizzy says, "Look, I'm gonna be real. I don't trust people who go outside the law to handle this. I have so much distrust for this Ballard bastard. I want to know what's on his hard drive." Yeah, I'm not gonna say that Tim Ballard is I'm not gonna go as far as you were implying there. I think he probably is just a guy who wants you to think more highly of him. And I think he's a guy, like I said, watch the video. It goes further into detail with the issues of his organization. And I should point out that like he either left his organization or was kicked out of his organization like right around the time this movie came out, or like a couple months beforehand. So I don't know that much about him. I don't really care to know that much about him. This movie is not for anyone. Don't see it. I watched it so that you don't have to.
Hey, thanks for watching. I'm trying to get my channel monetized, so your view means a lot. Don't forget to toss me a like and subscribe and ring the bell. I stream every Monday and Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific, so catch me live and join in on the convo. You can find all my socials in the description below, and thank you to all my patrons with a special shout out to Piftle Cakes and Ryan D. Your support means the world. Catch you next time.